Was Rome truly crumbling, or merely rearranging its furniture? Did a bishop's whispered plea save a continent, or was it a desperate gamble against a tide of blood and fire? And what if the echoes of empires weren't just whispers in history books, but the restless murmurs of a world perpetually rebuilding itself, tribe by tribe, king by king, faith by faith? The rain in Gaul smelled like iron and fear. It wasn't the gentle patter of a summer shower, it was a metallic drumming, a prelude to the slaughter. 150,000. Hydadeus claimed 300,000. A brook choked with corpses, a river of crimson. These weren't numbers. They were the shattered remnants of Roman legions swallowed by Attila's horde. Jordan's, a chronicler with a penchant for the dramatic, described a scene so horrific, it defied simple words. Imagine a battlefield transformed into a macabre mirror, reflecting the scale of the devastation. Theodoric I, a Visigothic king, didn't just fall in battle, he vanished, a kingless shadow over his diminished people. The Franks, once a formidable force, limped home, their ranks decimated, their pride drowned in blood. Then the Hunnic shadow stretched across the Rhine. Attila wasn't interested in a quick victory, he was a collector, a connoisseur of chaos. Aquileia, a bustling Roman port, became a funeral pyre. Milan, a jewel of the empire, was reduced to rubble and ash. Ticinum, a strategic town, vanished beneath the weight of Hunnic fury. Aetius, the Romans' last desperate hope, wasn't leading a grand army, he was issuing frantic orders, a frantic conductor leading a failing orchestra. The Romans, trapped in a desperate game of whack-a-hun, harassed the invaders with small, scattered attacks, a pathetic attempt to slow the inevitable. But the real drama unfolded in Rome itself. Valentinian III, a young emperor with a fragile grip on power, fled south, abandoning the city to its fate. Leo the Great, a bishop who'd never wielded a sword, stepped forward. He wasn't a warrior, he was a voice, a plea, a desperate bargaining chip. He journeyed to the Po River, a lone figure confronting the terrifying presence of Attila. The story told by Prosper of Aquitaine is bizarre. Attila, overwhelmed by Leo's holiness, was struck dumb, a warrior confronted by something beyond the reach of steel and fire. Paul the deacon offered an even stranger image, a monstrous figure, half Mars, half Saint Peter, radiating an unearthly terror. But the truth, as always, was likely more mundane, a desperate man playing a desperate hand. The Huns were exhausted, their coffers overflowing with loot, their ranks decimated by plague. Leo's intervention wasn't magic, it was a calculated maneuver, a way to escape the carnage. Leo returned to Rome, not as a conqueror but as a savior. Valentinian, recognizing the shift in power, declared Leo the head of the entire Christian church, a move that instantly elevated the bishop's status. It wasn't just spiritual authority, it was a claim to power, a recognition of his ability to safeguard the church and, by extension, the empire. Attila, defeated and humiliated, retreated, demanding Honoria, a young Roman princess, as a sign of his continued ambition. He wasn't interested in conquering Rome, he wanted the idea of Rome, the title of emperor. But Attila's reign ended not with a glorious battle, but with a gruesome, almost comical death. According to Jordan's, the king, overcome with wine and sleep, choked on his own blood. His attendants, horrified, broke down the doors to find him sprawled in his bed, surrounded by his bride, Ildico, whose tears mingled with the crimson stain. His officers, fearing desecration, buried him deep beneath a mountain of treasure, erasing any trace of his grave. It was a fitting end for a man who had built his empire on violence and destruction, a violent end mirroring the violent life he had led. The Hunnic Empire, once a terrifying force, began to unravel. Attila's sons, ambitious and ruthless, attempted to inherit his legacy, but they lacked his charisma, his ruthlessness. The Huns, a nomadic people, were not built for empire, they were tribes, loosely connected by a distant past and a charismatic leader. Like the Visigoths before them, they were a collection of warriors, not a nation. Meanwhile, across the sea in Britain, the echoes of Rome's decline were shaping a new destiny. The island, largely untouched by Roman rule, was a patchwork of tribes, each vying for dominance. Niall of the Nine Hostages, a cunning and ruthless leader, emerged as the dominant force. He wasn't a king in the traditional sense. He was a warlord, a chieftain who commanded loyalty through strength and conquest. His mother, a Roman captive, introduced a subtle but significant influence, a touch of Roman culture, a whisper of empire. The legend of Niall is shrouded in myth, but the story of his conquests is brutally clear. He led raids into Roman territory, capturing slaves and riches, establishing a reputation as a fearsome warrior. He wasn't interested in building a lasting empire, he was interested in plunder and glory. But Niall's ambition attracted other tribes, and soon, he was embroiled in a bloody struggle for control of Ireland. He formed alliances, waged wars, and ultimately emerged victorious, consolidating his power over 9 tribes, hence his name. His reign marked the beginning of the Niall dynasty, a lineage that would dominate Ireland for centuries. And then came the Angles and the Saxons, invited to Britain by a desperate king named Vortigern. Vortigern, facing threats from the Britons and the Irish, sought assistance from these Germanic tribes. He promised them land and riches in exchange for their military support. But the Angles and Saxons, driven by their own ambitions, quickly turned on Vortigern, seizing control of the island. The arrival of the Anglo-Saxons wasn't a sudden invasion, it was a gradual process of conquest and settlement. They pushed the Britons westward, establishing their own kingdoms and transforming the landscape of Britain forever. The story of Vortigern and the Germanic tribes is a tale of betrayal and ambition, a reminder that even the most desperate alliances can have devastating consequences. As the Roman Empire crumbled, the seeds of new nations were being sown. In Ireland, the Niall dynasty rose to prominence, shaping the culture and language of the island. In Britain, the Anglo-Saxons established a new kingdom, forging a new identity from the ruins of the old. And in the East, the Byzantine Empire, the last vestige of Rome, struggled to maintain its grip on power, while the Persian Empire, a rival contender, sought to expand its influence. The Battle of Vartanants, fought in 451, wasn't a decisive victory for either side. It was a brutal stalemate, a desperate clash between two empires vying for control of a small kingdom. Vartan, the Armenian general, fought valiantly, but he was ultimately overwhelmed by the Persian forces. Yazdegerd II, the Persian emperor, didn't just conquer Armenia, he crushed its spirit, imprisoning and torturing its leaders. The Armenians, once a Christian kingdom, became a Persian province, their culture and religion suppressed. The conflict between the Eastern and Western empires and the Persian Empire was a reflection of the broader geopolitical landscape of the 5th century. Both empires were struggling to maintain their power in the face of internal divisions and external threats. The religious disputes, the political intrigues, the military campaigns, all of these were part of a larger struggle for survival. As the Roman Empire faded into the mists of history, new empires were rising from the ashes. The Niall in Ireland, the Anglo-Saxons in Britain, the Byzantines in the East, they were all building their own legacies, shaping the course of history in ways that would resonate for centuries to come. And so the question remains, was Rome truly crumbling or merely rearranging its furniture? Did a bishop's whispered plea save a continent, or was it a desperate gamble against a tide of blood and fire? And what if the echoes of empires weren't just whispers in history books, but the restless murmurs of a world perpetually rebuilding itself, tribe by tribe, king by king, faith by faith? The answer, like the currents of history itself, is always shifting, always evolving, always waiting to be discovered.